Bienvenue, and thank you everyone for joining us today. Au début, j'aimerais prendre un moment pour faire une reconnaissance des territoires traditionnels où se trouvent nos panélistes aujourd'hui. In Vancouver, we are gathered on the traditional and unceded territories of the Musqueam people. À Ottawa, nous sommes réunis sur le territoire traditionnel et non cédé de la nation Algonquin-Anishinaabe. Et à Montréal, nous sommes réunis sur le territoire traditionnel et non cédé de la nation Ganakahak. I would like to pay respect, we would all like to pay genuine respect to the continued connections with the past, present, and future in our ongoing relationships with Indigenous and other groups in our communities. So we're going to have a terrific discussion today because we have three very thoughtful and engaged panelists. Two of them with us now. Kate Murray will be joining us shortly. And I will introduce them more formally when we get to that part of the program. My name is Gordon Macaulay. I'm the president and CEO of Admari Bioinnovations. Chez Admari, nous faisons trois choses: développer des entreprises, développer des écosystèmes, et développer des talents. In building companies, we work with the most exciting scientists and their scientific research to develop commercially compelling companies. And with those scientists, we've raised about $1.5 billion of real risk capital. Their companies are worth better than $3 billion today, and they employ about 1,000 Canadians. In building ecosystems, we have major innovation centers in Montreal and Vancouver that are home to about 40 companies, employing about 350 people. And we're also very engaged in building all the connections between us that define really successful ecosystems, and in particular, the Admari community, the first digital community dedicated to the life sciences. And in building talent, our Executive Institute just launched its fourth cohort at building on 60 alumni who will be the C-suite talent of this industry in the future. And our Bioinnovation Scientist program is focused on helping recent grads, typically master's and doctoral grads, apply their expertise in a commercial setting with over 300 active participants today. And we were delighted last week to announce a partnership with CASTLE, the Canadian Alliance for Skills Training in Life Sciences, to bring to Canada the global standard in biomanufacturing training. I say all that not to brag, although I am paid to brag, but rather to say we're here with a front row seat. Each of us on this panel has had a front row seat to how our ecosystem has responded to the pandemic, and indeed, at different moments, each of us has left that seat and been engaged in the field in responding to the pandemic. La pandémie nous a démontré la valeur et le rôle essentiel de l'industrie science de la vie, montrant une voie pour l'avenir. And if we're going to show the way, collaboration amongst all of us is absolutely fundamental. Certainly, the government of Canada has made a significant multi-billion-dollar investment to support this collaboration, from basic research through commercialization, clinical trials, and capital generation. So how do we capitalize on that significant investment? Our panelists today intend to discuss what's next as we slowly emerge from the last 2 years, what's changed, what hasn't changed, and what must we do to build a vibrant and sustainable life sciences industry in Canada. I'd like to start with my colleague Nadine Beaugé, the President and Directrice Générale de IDECO à Montréal. Nadine has a deep expertise in intellectual property and drug development, a PhD in biomedical sciences, a master's degree in cellular biopathology, a bachelor's degree in anatomy, and just to round it all out, an MBA from HSC. Nadine, je vous donne la parole.
Merci beaucoup, Gordon. So thank you very much for this kind introduction and for Admari's invitation to take part in this great panel alongside my colleagues, Rob, and later on, Kate. So good afternoon, everyone. Allow me to start by saying that I was really compelled by today's theme of realizing Canada's life sciences opportunity. In spite of its very grim aspects, COVID-19 has also opened the eyes of all sectors, all sectors, to the importance of life sciences. The last months have clearly shown us that the moment when pharmaceutical research and innovation truly bear fruit, when they improve the quality of life of a patient, it ultimately drives economic recovery and growth. Imagine, for example, being treated for a tumor with a targeted approach where normal cells are left undamaged. Well, this scenario and others involve Canadian innovations that have been nurtured from idea to impact at my organization, IRICOR, which is a center of excellence in commercialization and research, based at the University of Montreal, more particularly at the Institute for Research in Immunology and Cancer, IRIC. As a key component of the pipeline for taking innovations to market, we are a project maturation cluster with the mandate to accelerate the discovery and development of projects towards commercialization of novel therapies in cancer and rare diseases, either through partnerships with industry or through company creation. We mitigate the risks associated with the development of early stage research. Actually, we leverage public funding to bring added value to academic research, and later on, we're able to attract foreign investments to Canadian innovation. Well, just a bit of history now. Since our creation in 2008, we have supported about 100 projects at different stages of their development, which has resulted in creating significant IP, intellectual property, and we started 8 clinical trials. We established about 30 strategic partnerships with pharma companies from across the world and contributed to the creation of 4 companies. One of those companies is Excelterra, a clinical stage cell expansion and engineering company delivering proprietary molecules for patients suffering from blood cancers and other indications. Excelterra's assets come in part from work done at Dr. Sauvageau's and Marinier's labs in collaboration with the Stem Cell Network, the organization that you'll hear a bit more later on. An example of how our organizations to contribute to create successful spin-offs and innovations with tangible impacts for patients. Those spin-offs are vectors that efficiently showcase Canadian innovation while bringing foreign R&D dollars in Canada. This year, in fact, Excelterra has signed a sizable deal, a licensing deal with Astellas, a Japanese company, for the use of its top technology, UM179, in a field that it wasn't going to develop itself. So many of the projects our organization has been involved in came out of the lab in less than 10 years. How do we do it? Well, our signature strategy revolves around 3 key elements. The first is that we work hand in hand with research teams, their tech transfer offices, and pair them with world-class research infrastructure and industry-grade talent. Of note, we provide privileged access to forums and expertise usually found in academia. A prime example is the one of IRIC's drug discovery unit, with its 70 medicinal chemists and biologists, which is the largest academia-based group with industry expertise in Canada. This is the type of expertise we bring to the table when we are involved in a project. Second key element is that we focus on indications in which we have a strong network, namely in oncology and rare diseases. And finally, our third key element is that we apply a hybrid research and business model to each of the projects of our portfolio to bring them to their next value inflection point, while developing a growing pool of business-savvy scientific talent. Initially, our mandate was really centered around IRIC and University of Montreal, our founding institutions. And in light of our success over the years, the federal government has entrusted us with further significant funding to expand our footprint across Canada to include collaborations with research centers and universities from across the country. Access to both federal and provincial funding is key to advancing research objectives to the point where they attract private support. It allows us to co-invest with other non-profit organizations like the Oncopole, Fonds de Recherche de Santé du Québec, the Quebec Breast Cancer Foundation, Ovarian Cancer Canada, and Glyconet, an Alberta-based network of centers of excellence. Our 20 projects in portfolio span the country. The research teams come from 4 provinces: British Columbia, Alberta, Quebec, and Ontario. So we help guide those projects to the point where they can attract commercial partners who are in the best position to advance those in clinical trials. When private partners come in too early in academic partnerships, assets have not reached their full potential for adequate returns for public sector stakeholders, and this is where we add the most value. The value also takes shape in knowledge transfer between my team at IVICA and research teams that we're involved in. We bring our expertise in milestone-based project management, IP strategy, drug discovery and development, as well as business development. After partnerships with industry, there's still knowledge transfer between academic groups and industry groups. And this is what the academics can bring to their next projects. Much of our private sector financial contributions come from abroad, primarily from US or Europe, which makes us a key player in attracting funding for made in Canada research and innovation. An example of such partnership is the one that we established alongside with IRIC at the University of Montreal with Bristol Myers Squibb. This has led to value creation in terms of human resource efficiency, foreign R&D funding for research activities run in Canada, licensing agreements, and commercialization revenues. Another example is the deal that we made with Ipsen earlier in 2020 around a project we had previously supported. So under the leadership of University of Montreal and partners and other small companies as well, the project is geared towards its next value inflection point to advance lead molecules to the development stage with R&D funding provided by Ipsen for research conducted in Canada. So if Ipsen decides to exercise its option, the company would assume all further development activities and commercialize the drug candidate globally. Another way that we can showcase Canadian innovation through international partnerships. My last point is on entrepreneurship. Another avenue for taking projects coming out of ARICOR to the market is through company creation. So we've collaborated with programs that are geared towards entrepreneurship development in life sciences in collaboration with, for example, with the John Molson Executive Center. And we intend to broaden our partnership pool with organizations like Edmari that have successfully built anchor companies in Canada, like Gordon just mentioned previously, with the joint intent to continue to strengthen and deepen entrepreneurship in Canada with high quality companies. So I will end by restating that the impact of our work is not only felt by the patients receiving the novel therapies to come, but also by all partners and stakeholders from the public and private sector. Through our model, we're able to attract and retain highly qualified personnel, both in research and in business that would otherwise go outside of Canada. We retain them in Canada while encouraging entrepreneurship, which is an important area where we want and can do better in Canada. So the ARICOR solution contributes to put Canada on the map as the go-to place for viable and robust therapeutic solutions, and we look forward to federal policies that will allow us to thrive in such exciting years for our sector. Thank you very much.
I think it's just a great example of that expertise and collaboration with capital all applied at the right time. So I think that's very helpful to set the context for the discussion. Let's turn now to Rob Anand, the President and CEO of Genome Canada, widely regarded expert in research and innovation policy, and somebody who so many of us watch with great admiration, was deeply engaged in so many efforts around the pandemic, particularly with efforts like Cancogen. So we look forward to Rob's comments. He has a PhD in biochemistry, undergrad degree in biology and English, so I like that part. And let me now ask for you to make a few comments, Rob.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Gordon, and thanks a lot, Nadine, for the great overview of all the really cool things happening at Iroquois. Un grand bonjour tout le monde. Merci d'avoir m'invité aujourd'hui. Thank you for the invitation. I'm just going to maybe start out with some kind of general comments and talk a little bit about Genome Canada. I know, given the subject of the panel today, that I risk kind of preaching to the choir here, but I really do think that we are on the verge of something very special in the life sciences. That it's a remarkable time. As somebody who's worked in and around the space for a number of years, I think that there's something special about where we are right now. I really do feel that we're, in a sense, on the verge of what you could even think of as a bio-revolution that I believe is going to transform our economy, our society over the next 20 to 30 years, the same way that the digital revolution has done over the last 20 or 30 years. So we really are, I think, at like kind of almost a perfect storm right now. And I think it's driven by three things. First, genomics. The DNA is the operating system of living things. And, reading and writing that information is crucial in the kind of transformation that we're already seeing and we will see over the next little while. For the younger ones, perhaps in the crowd here, let me take your mind back 20 years to the completion of the Human Genome Project. Just an enormous generational accomplishment, something we should be very, very proud of. But that project took an international consortium about 15 years and several $1 billion to sequence a single human genome. Things have changed in the last 20 years. Now to sequence that human genome is going to cost you $1,000 or less. You can do it sort of overnight. So we've gone from a period where we were sequencing one genome collectively so we could understand this kind of rule, like the kind of rules of life, to a situation now where we're sequencing thousands of people in order to understand the diversity of the human population. It's really unprecedented, and it changes the game. And it's not just for DNA. Other molecular data involved in living systems is generating just enormous amounts of data, which really leads to the second driver of this revolution, which is data management and analysis. Genomics projects now are creating petabytes of data, just unbelievable amounts of data, allowing us to really uncover a lot of the subtle interactions that are driving the phenotypes that are of interest to us when we're doing drug development, disease diagnosis, and so on. Even I would say 5 years ago, we would have struggled with the storage and management of all of that data, but huge advances in cloud computing, in kind of a high-speed networks, as well, obviously in leaps and advances in AI are now pushing the limits in terms of discovery of new and interesting and novel understandings of living systems, and that's going to have a huge impact going forward right across the board. And the third piece is really the tools that have been developed to really kind of use this information. And here I'm talking about CRISPR-based gene editing. I'm talking about biomanufacturing, including mRNA vaccines, all the various tools in and around synthetic biology. Again, these are transformational for those of us who spent time on doing molecular biology in what seems like kind of the olden days. The ability now to actually work with this information, not just reading the information, but able to use the building blocks of biology to really drive transformation is going to have a huge impact on our health, on the environment, and the economy. So these three kind of main big areas are really coming together at kind of almost coincidentally at the same time, and is going to drive just an enormous transformation. And we see that during the COVID pandemic. from the viral kind of isolation of this novel coronavirus to the sequence of that virus within a matter of days to a vaccine going into people's arms in a matter of months. This is just transformational. We saw on our side, global efforts to track the evolution of the virus in real time in order to inform public health decision making, to be able to understand risks as variants of concern were popping up. There are still ongoing projects involving thousands of patients, big projects here through our sequencing centers to look at the genetic factors that contribute to the varying responses that we have to COVID infection and understanding things like long COVID. So it's easy to take all this for granted, but this is really new stuff. I mean, we're living in the future, and this is just going to accelerate in the years ahead, and it's very, very exciting. Just a couple words about Genome Canada. So Genome Canada, we are 20 years old. We were born in the shadow of the Human Genome Project. Just a little bit of sort of trivia or lore. When Genome Canada was created, it was largely a grassroots effort by Canadian scientists, because Canada, though we had some really strong researchers early in the genomics era, we weren't part of that global consortium looking to sequence the human genome. And so scientists here in Canada got together and convinced the federal government to create an organization that could help steward investments in genomics in order to really capitalize on these huge advances. When we were created, Genome Canada 20 years ago, we were created as an independent, not-for-profit organization working very closely with the federal government, but at arm's length, working across sectors. So we are about half of our work is in health, and the rest is in food and agriculture, forestry, oceans, the environment, energy. If it has DNA, then we're working on it. So really very cross-sector, cross-disciplinary. Of course, biology and biochemistry right at its core, but we do a lot of really important work, not just in other areas of science, but also in the social sciences. So we have about 15% of our portfolio supports research in what we call GELS, the genomics and its ethical, environmental, economic, legal, and social implications. Again, understanding the not just the scientific elements and the technical elements, but the social impacts of disruptive technologies. And then as a national organization, we work with the federal government, but we also work with provincial governments and industry across the country. So over the last 20 years, Genome Canada has facilitated roughly $4 billion worth of investment in genomics projects across Canada. About 40% of that is federal dollars, and the rest comes from provincial investments, as well as close partnerships with industry across these various sectors. And we work very closely with 6 regional genome centers to sort of build out projects that reflect the opportunities and challenges of the regions right across Canada. So it really is a national model. If I cast my mind back, the first 10 years, I would say sort of Genome Canada 1.0 was really focused on laying the foundation, building out that initial infrastructure we needed in Canada, both physical infrastructure and human infrastructure, building out world-class sequencing facilities at several locations across the country, supporting that first generation of genome researchers in health, but also in these other sectors. Really about, in a sense, kind of building out the foundation on which we would then move forward. The next 10 years, that sort of Genome Canada 2.0 was really around sort of reaping the benefits of what we think of maybe as applied genomics. So really trying to connect the research investments into use case. So working with industry, working with other receptors to really make sure that the investments that were happening on the research side had a path to application. We're at a point today now as we think about this convergence of these kind of 3 ingredients that are driving this biorevolution to look towards the next 10 years. And at Genome Canada, what we're doing is we're really adopting a mission-driven approach to understanding the areas in which genomics can make a significant impact, and then working with our community to design the kinds of projects to really move the needle in health, but also on things like climate and the environment and in food and agriculture. So we're really using this mission-driven approach to marshal our resources, working again in the old tradition of Genome Canada with our community of scientists from the bottom up to identify those opportunities, and then to use the abilities we have in our ecosystem to drive forward. And we really saw that during COVID. The 2 projects that we have that fit under what we call our Canadian COVID-19 Genomics Network, were both driven by scientists. On the one hand, was a project to sequence 10,000 COVID patients in order to understand the genetic underpinnings of disease. And this was really driven by CGen, our three big sequencing facilities in Canada. And the other project is around sequencing hundreds of thousands of samples of the virus in order to track its evolution in Canada and its variants. And again, really started out by scientists who themselves said, how can genomics help solve this crisis? And now we've delivered on that and contributed to the global effort. So really, this mission-driven approach is meant to harness the resources and bring them to bear on the real questions of our time. Just looking ahead, I think we have a few, obviously big opportunities building on COVID. And I think the transformative work that has happened over the last year and a half, we now have a responsibility to ensure the ongoing health of the infrastructure around surveillance for future pandemics, how we can apply that to things like antimicrobial resistance, as well as addressing some of the challenges that became obvious during COVID. Genomics is contributing to enormous opportunities in precision health. Again, we have a project looking at pediatric rare disease and applying large-scale data sets to help with both diagnosis and treatment of rare disease, but there are enormous opportunities across the health spectrum when it comes to precision health. Climate change and genomics is an area where there is enormous opportunity, whether we're looking at soil health and carbon capture, or whether we're looking at things like adaptation when it comes to our key crops and livestock. And then finally, biomanufacturing. And I know we'll have an opportunity to dig more into that, but looking beyond today's vaccines into other ways we can use living systems to drive important and sustainable manufacturing practice. There are challenges, and I know we'll dig into those too. And some of those have to do with collaboration and coordination. And I think in some ways, COVID has helped us to sort of understand how shared objectives can and shared opportunities can really drive these kinds of opportunities for better coordination and collaboration. And of course, we're very proud of the relationships we have, not just with my fellow panelists here, but other organizations across the country. But we do need to always be asking ourselves, how can we do more to fill the gaps and support the ecosystem in order to make sure that we're capitalizing on this big opportunity. So I'll pass it back there to you, Gordon, but looking forward to the conversation.
That is super. Thanks very much, Rob. I think it's such a great example of the extraordinary research enterprise that we have in this country, and the examples both of where we've come from in what is a remarkably short period of time over the course of 20 years, and even what that foundation was able to do so quickly in a matter of weeks during the pandemic. I think is an extraordinary example of the potential that we have together. Again, looking at the opportunities to collaborate effectively and work with the joint objectives. Let me now introduce our third panelist, Kate Murray, who is the Chief Executive Officer of the Stem Cell Network. Joined us a couple of minutes late because we dragged her from her board of directors meeting, so we appreciate that, Kate. And let me just say that Kate has deep expertise and experience in certainly in developing the Stem Cell Network, as well as other landmark organizations in this country like CIHR and the Canadian Council of Academies. And probably most importantly from my perspective, a highly regarded alumna of the Admare Executive Institute. So Kate, over to you.
Thanks so much. Okay, so appreciate that introduction, and I would just like to say I'm jealous of your Starbucks, Gord. So let me just start with extending my thanks and for being invited today. I'll try not to take up the full 8 minutes this afternoon so that we can dive deep into the discussion. In part, I'm doing this because I've already been spending too much time talking at our board meeting where we were discussing the future of the Stem Cell Network over the coming decade. So the Stem Cell Network, I'll give you a bit of quick context, is currently celebrating its 20th anniversary, just like Genome Canada. We are a national not-for-profit that supports three main objectives: funding stem cell and regenerative medicine research, training the next generation of talent to work within the regenerative medicine ecosystem, and to support knowledge mobilization and transfer of stem cell research for the benefit of all. Canadians, I don't know if you'll agree with me or not, are generally modest people. At least that's what I've decided is the reason most of us are not aware that stem cell research is Canada's science. It was 60 years ago that James Till and Ernst McCullough proved the existence of stem cells in Toronto, based in their labs at U of T. And since then, Canadians really have been leading the way in the field. It was a Canadian, Janet Rosen, who proved pluripotency of embryonic stem cells. It was Sam Weiss who identified human neural cells. And it was Frida Miller who identified skin-derived stem cells. And it was my boss and the scientific director of the Stem Cell Network, Michael Rudnicki, who identified muscle stem cells. The impact of all of these discoveries for fighting disease and illness can't be overstated. And the research has been carried on around the world based on these Canadian discoveries. Today, our researchers, they're taking their research to the clinic through clinical trials where access to patients is made available. Parkinson's, multiple sclerosis, wound repair, retinal degeneration, blood cancer, type 1 diabetes, brain and cardiovascular repair, and even treating COVID are all areas where stem cells are being used in the clinic to alleviate disease and illness. To me, it's just amazing and super exciting for the future of healthcare. The Stem Cell Network is and was created by researchers for researchers. And we partner with charities and foundations, industry and others to make our research happen. And it is our partnership model that I think is the linchpin of success. No one organization can do it on its own. And that's why we partner with Genome and Admare and Iroquois and so many others. In fact, there's a great project where both Iroquois and I and Stem Cell Network have come together. We have invested in research that's led by Drs. Anne Marnier and Guy Sauvigeau. Their work's focused on the treatment of blood cancers, leukemia, myeloma, lymphoma. The best way to treat those who are severely ill is with stem cells from umbilical cords and a transplant. However, the number of stem cells available from an umbilical cord is really very limited. Drs. Sauvigeau and Marnier have developed a process to expand the stem cells using a molecule called UM171 and a specialized bioreactor designed by Dr. Peter Zandstra in BC. This leading edge technology has the potential to not just treat, but to cure patients. And it's because of SCN and Iroquois and other Canadian funders that the technology is being developed within our borders. It hasn't gone south. And Guy has been able to roll out a company, XL Thera, and that company is continuing to be developed in Canada. That couldn't happen without our collective life sciences ecosystem support. It's incredibly important, not just for treating and bringing forward new health innovations, but also for establishing a really strong biotech sector. You know, we've got partnerships that have led to other spin-offs that we've done with Admare around Mesentech. And we also share a robust policy and ethics community with Genome Canada, which Rob spoke to a couple of minutes ago. I underscore these examples because to me, they speak to the considerable value of our life sciences ecosystem in driving benefits for our country. I'm really excited about the future, actually. Not too long ago, the Institute of Health Economics, they're based out of Alberta, led by a health economist, Chris McCabe. And they anticipated in a report that they did around the future of regenerative medicine, that within the decade, this field would be valued at 5 billion plus and will produce over 6,000 new high quality jobs. The life sciences really are where the future lies for our country. And I think COVID has underscored the importance of the life sciences for our country and for our health. Gord asked us in a pre-meeting out and address the implications of COVID for the life sciences. And I'm happy to do that. In fact, perhaps some of you may know that Derek Rossi, a Canadian stem cell biologist, is the co-founder of Moderna. And he did his initial studies at U of T and grew up in Scarborough. So that's right, you can thank a Canadian for your COVID-19 mRNA vaccine. We've got that going. Unfortunately, Moderna is not a Canadian biotech. It'd be nice if it was. Last week, the Stem Cell Network held its annual scientific meetings, and we had a tremendous panel on COVID-19 and cell and regenerative medicine approaches for solving a pandemic. 5 experts from across North America shared their work. One of them was Dr. Duncan Stewart, who's based here in Ottawa at the University of Ottawa and the Ottawa Hospital. And he spoke about a clinical trial he's been leading to treat COVID-19. SCN was the first in on this trial back in April 2020. We worked day and night to get a competition launched to get in the best applications we could for responding to COVID. And this clinical trial was a clear leader in what came in. The funding that the Stem Cell Network put into this trial really got the ball rolling for Dr. Stewart and his team. And since then, significant funds from the province and federal funders to turn this trial into a multi-center clinical trial. And it's now at a phase 2B. The cell treatment that they're offering is designed to calm the aggressive inflammation response that's caused by COVID and prevents oxygen transfer to the blood, ultimately damaging the lungs of patients. Approximately 70 people received the treatment. The initial findings, we now know, have been very positive, and their support for performing a random clinical trial for severe COVID, and that's now in the works. So this is great news. I think the point I'd make about this is that if it were not for the flexible and nimble funding environment that a Stem Cell Network or Genome Canada or others could offer, this trial might not have ever gotten off the ground. And the incredible work that Genome has been doing through COVID would have never been able to happen. Flexibility and being nimble are incredibly advantageous at a time like this. And in fact, what really matters to me is that this trial and our efforts gave nearly 70 gravely ill people and their families access to a leading treatment that would have not otherwise been available. The impact of that is really tremendous when you start to think about it. What COVID's taught us is the importance of being connected with the research community. For me, I've seen that in spades in recent months and over the last 2 years, hard to believe. Having the network and the mechanisms to respond quickly to our research community who can put forward the innovative solutions that we need is really incredibly important. And I would note that this therapy that I just referenced, led by Dr. Stewart, it didn't come out of thin air. It was built on research that had been supported by the Stem Cell Network in the years before COVID. That research, however, was focused on supporting premature babies with underdeveloped lungs. The technology developed through that preemie lung research provided the catalyst for this trial. And it was SCN members who were able to quickly come together and pivot for COVID. But that wouldn't have been done if we weren't funding across the pipeline. That's absolutely critical. So some people ask me about government support for research. Is it enough? Is it focused properly? Is it having a real impact for the life sciences? Well, let me just say this. Since 2016, the government has made continued investments in my organization without program cover. Those investments have had a direct impact on lives. They've also had an impact on growth within the life sciences biotech sector. Excelthera, Morphocell, Mesentex, Satellos, Blue Rock, stem cell technologies, I could go on. They've all benefited from the support that entities like ours and Admare and others can offer to get those companies across the valley of death and bring new products to market while staying Canadian. So yes, government investments in the life sciences are having an impact. They are benefiting us, and we need to stay the course. If we had only the large granting councils to depend on, I'm not sure that we'd see the growth and the competitiveness that we do see currently with our life sciences sector. So I was really pleased this past summer when the government launched its life sciences and biomanufacturing strategy. Canada needs that kind of strategic support if we're to provide those who live within our borders the high quality of life and well-being we all deserve. SCM, for one, is excited to be an active player in that government strategy. And in fact, we're working with our partners now to ensure that our community has the training they need to utilize biomanufacturing, to access it, or even work within it. So what COVID has taught us is we need a biomanufacturing industry within Canada. Relying on other nations, it puts us at risk. And I'm really heartened to see such an investment being placed in this area and such attention to it. So much attention that even my mother now knows what biomanufacturing is. That's fantastic. So we also need talent to work within this sector, and we need our scientific community knowledgeable about how to take a product, a cell product, a gene product, a vaccine to manufacturing. It's not simple. It's not straightforward. It's a big and complicated puzzle. And that's why SCN is partnering up on the training front, providing support to academic and hospital-based manufacturers, providing funding to researchers who need to access biomanufacturing. And I'm really excited about our future plans in this area, because I think it'll help us take this nation known for basic research, its strength in basic and developmental research, to a position where it will be well known and well respected for its translational strength. That's the future. And if COVID's taught us anything, it's that we need to keep an eye on the ball and strengthen our translational capacity. That can only be done with a robust and integrated life sciences sector. I'll leave it there. Back to you, Gord.
It's a great example of how we can all work effectively together. And I think, especially on the biomanufacturing front, it was exciting to see the investment announcement last week about Vectra in Charlottetown, and as well Moderna. You talked about intending on building their first facility outside of the U.S. In Canada, and even though there might be a little bit of sadness that that's not a Canadian company, I think we are creating the landscape now, and it's a dramatically different one than it would have been had we've been having this conversation 3, 4, 5 years ago. When you think about the companies, the Zymeworks, the repairs, the stem cells, and so on, all across the country, who are absolutely putative anchor companies in this space, Accelera being another great example. So we've come a long way, but let me just ask colleagues, what do you think are the remaining roadblocks? What are the things we have to do? And before I'll go to Nadine first. And before I do that, I want to say we've set a pandemic record, because so far nobody has had to be reminded that they're on mute. So I want to keep this record going. So just reminding you that you need to unmute yourselves. And I should also, as I pass it over to Nadine, when I introduced Kate to say she was a proud alumna of the Executive Institute, I neglected to mention in Nadine's introduction that she too is a widely respected alumna of the Executive Institute. So Rob, you and I are in serious trouble here, pal, because I know the program that these two have succeeded with. So Nadine, what are the roadblocks that we still see?
So thank you very much, Gord. So it was really enlightening to hear Rob's and Kate's comments, and we didn't even exchange notes between Kate and I, because just to tell you, Kate, Excelterra was also an example of the collaboration I mentioned between Stem Cell Network and Iroquois. So that's great. Just wanted to mention that. One of the roadblocks that I see going forward, although we have great support from government, I see that in the recent years there was great, focus on aligning private dollars with public dollars. And from, I think, all the things that we've mentioned so far, one of the great strengths that our 3 and 4 organizations have had so far is to have this great public support from both federal and provincial governments, increasing the value of academic research that can be done without being necessarily aligned from the get-go from the private sector incentives, so that we can bring them to their next value inflection point and later on bring private partners to the table. And this is, so I think this is something, it's not an obstacle, but it's something that the government should be wary about, asking us to collaborate, for collaborations that are not necessarily natural. We know each other's organizations, we've had 15 plus years, being made. So we know who we are. So we know how to collaborate with one another, increase the value of publicly funded assets before getting pharmas or VCs interested in what we have. So this is something I think that we still need to advocate to our stakeholders from government.
So it's the collaboration is critical, and we're making great progress, but we can't lose sight of it. We have to keep that focus there.
Exactly.
Rob,
Exactly.
Rob, what do you think the roadblocks that still exist we need to think about?
Well, maybe I'll mention 3 things. I think the first is really lining up our efforts and investments in innovation with sort of reform and attention to regulation. I think really, this again in COVID, I think we saw a real sort of energy and a focus on ensuring that we maintained important kind of regulatory process, but also we're able to be flexible enough to also support innovative new approaches. And I think going forward, that's going to be absolutely the case. And this is certainly not limited to the life sciences sector, but it's the fact that in government, often the right and left hands have a hard time kind of lining up. And despite lots of effort and good intention on the kind of supply side around innovation, it will all be for naught if we can't line up on the kind of the regulatory and on the procurement sides, which help drive a lot of what we do. And although we may be, in a sense, research organizations working more at that front end, I think we still have a responsibility to lend our voices to the attention at that kind of the other end of the pipeline in order to make sure that there's a path there. The second area is just around the fragmentation of the ecosystem. Again, we in our respective roles have a responsibility to try to build bridges across the gaps to identify ways we can support others into the ecosystem or initiatives being launched to help maybe fill some of those gaps. Fragmentation can exist, within even say a federal ecosystem. It exists within the relationships between the federal and provincial ecosystems, sometimes some of the gaps and overlaps that exist between almost subsectors within the life sciences ecosystem. So I think that we have a responsibility to always be trying to sort of identify where those gaps are and making sure that we don't remain fragmented. And both of those things, for instance, one of the areas that has been a major focus for us throughout the pandemic has been around data sharing. And this is something that we really struggle with in Canada, something that was a challenge before COVID, but those little fractures became all the more important and more difficult during COVID, and the ability to actually share data, whether it's because of the regulatory barriers, because we are rightly concerned with privacy, but perhaps have it tuned too far that we are inhibiting innovation, whether it's because of the gaps that exist between the capacity at the provincial level to contribute to national and international. There's lots of different pieces, and that's just one example where those things kind of come together. But I think the third barrier, as it were, relates to kind of Kate's comment about perhaps the modesty of Canadians, and that is, I think that sometimes we are thwarted by our lack of ambition, and I think that we can and should expect more in Canada from the sector. That sometimes when you're working on a specific project or certain regulatory issue or what have you, it's easy about just kind of that next step on the path. And I think that opportunities like this present I think the chance for us to take a step back and say, what can we actually achieve? How do we think big? How do we make sure that we're inspiring the policymakers and decision makers to ensure that we see the kind of sustained investments that are required, so that we can have rapid responses that are in effect 20 years in the making, because that's what it takes to really build a strong ecosystem. So it was just a couple of ideas there.
I think you're reminding me. You and Kate are reminding me of a post that a friend of mine from Switzerland that I studied with sent me yesterday. In fact, that said, "One day Canadians are going to take over the world, and you're all going to be sorry," which I thought was just a wonderful play on words. But I got to tell you, I think that aspirational thing is 100% right. And one of the things that I'm really excited about is I really sense the shift over the last 2 or 3 years, maybe a year or two before the pandemic, so maybe 3 or 4 years. People really saying, we actually can do this. We actually can create companies here that will grow and prosper here and put down roots here and take advantage of unique Canadian expertise and competitive advantages, so that regardless of where the ownership ends up, that company remains in Canada. I think that's really key, Rob. We need to continue to push that for sure. Kate, what sort of roadblocks do you still see out there?
Let me just say I agree with everything that's been said thus far. I think the only thing I'd add into that conversation is around training in our labor force. We're going to have some labor shortage demands. I think it was BioTalent who put out a report on this and suggesting that in the next decade or so, we'll have a labor shortage of about 16,000 people. So that's an issue. That means we really need to look at immigration, in my view, and how we're going to tap our immigration system to help support that labor shortage. And we need talent that can be skilled enough and knowledgeable enough to work within our growing biosec sector, to work within the life sciences overall, who have the diverse skill set to be able to understand regulation, understand manufacturing, understand financing and business models, to be proficient at science communication, who have these diverse skill sets, who will really help to be able to grow the life sciences, supporting talent, building talent, and addressing the labor shortage. I think is where I'd say we've got some work to do, and that in one respect will make us or break us.
Yeah, I couldn't possibly agree with that more. I mean, what's fascinating right now at this moment is that if you go and talk to biotech CEOs across the country and ask them their number one or two issue, it's talent and space. And in the first time, in whichever order, it doesn't really matter. But in the first time, certainly in my experience, 20 plus years in this industry, the number one issue isn't capital. There's a fair bit of capital available. The challenge is talent based, and I think. I agree with the BioTalent Canada report, which I'll tell you, we did a little examination of the record amount of capital raised last year was meant to support the employment of 1,500 PhD master students, and that's a tremendous opportunity. But I also think there's a need there to continue this collaboration that we're all talking about, and Kate and I talked about this morning in a different context. I mean, We're doing things in biomanufacturing training as is the Stem Cell Network and others. And we really need to make sure that we stay aligned in what makes sense and what's really needed, because otherwise that fragmentation that Rob talks about is just going to slow us down. Maybe we'll shift gears a little bit from roadblocks to triumph. If I asked you to say, what's the one thing over the last 18 months of this miserable pandemic that just represented a triumph, what would that be? Rob, you've got so many triumphs that Genome Canada's been part of. I'll let you choose one first.
Thanks, Gordon. Yeah, I sort of alluded to it in the last sort of comments, but which is just that the rapid response that Genome Canada mounted happened in the matter of weeks, but it really was 20 years in the making. And I saw that right across the whole ecosystem, right? That it really was the mobilization. And I think this is something that, it is true that genomics, to kind of Kate's point too, like my parents finally know what genomics is because of, suddenly it's in the newspaper, it's in the claims, it's on the news. Like, so, but the response really was driven by the community of scientists who saw the ability to contribute meaningfully to the crisis. And so for us, I mean, the big triumph certainly was the ability to bring that community together and overcome a lot of the persistent challenges around things like data sharing, like jurisdictional issues, like some of the, I would say, maybe weak spots that had developed over time in the infrastructure required for really good surveillance, monitoring, and response, and to build a system on the fly that I think is going to serve Canadians really well in the future. And that has been a combined effort involving academic researchers, but also public health labs, the National Microbiology Laboratory, public health, officials, both the federal and provincial levels, hospitals, you name it, coming together around a shared objective. And I think that this gets to this point that, when we can establish, big objectives and big opportunities, the community will respond. And I do think that going forward, we have to ensure that we don't retreat into, some of our tendencies to say, kind of, yes, but what about this? And what about that? And what about this region? What about that issue? And so on. And instead to say, you know what? There are some areas where we really should and can kind of swing for the fences and rally around, big challenges. And, there are big challenges in health, certainly going forward. I mentioned AMR is definitely going to be one, but there's, there are any number. There are areas where life sciences and the investments we're making now in health biomanufacturing will contribute meaningfully to climate change, right? To other issues. So I think that if we as a community can also identify some of these more ambitious challenge areas, then organizations are able then to kind of, in a sense, rally around them, coordinate effectively, and whether that's on talent, research, investment, or what have you, make progress. Because certainly for us, that was our experience for the last 18 months. It really provided a rallying point for the community, and the community delivered.
Nadine, what do you think? What's the big triumph that you've seen over the course of the pandemic?
Thank you, Gord. So I think one of the big triumphs that we've seen specifically at Iricor is the fact that with the COVID, we're able to be better equipped to establish virtual collaborations across the country. As I mentioned, we started at Iricor with the initial mandate with our founding institution, University of Montreal. The mandate was broadened to Canada. And it happened, in 2018 and 2020, the COVID hit. But it has allowed us, in a way, to establish those partnerships with research groups in Alberta, Ontario, British Columbia, seamlessly. So it's now normal to have those long distance collaborations with all the tools that have been developed. So it is an opportunity to establish those relationships from across the country. And just as a matter of fact, it allows us to attract as well talent from outside that can, from the get-go, incorporate our organizations. Just to let you know, I've recruited my VP of Scientific Operations from California. I still haven't we still haven't met officially, but we've worked with him a year now, and everything is going according to plan. Everything for sure. It's always good to have the in-person collaborations, but it allows us to be more imaginative with the relationships that we're establishing. And a point I would like to mention is particularly for the indications. So I think it's an opportunity as well with the COVID to develop, more innovative ways to find therapeutic solutions for, in particular, cancer. Because recently I saw from StatsCan, and there were some reports as well, saying that there is going to be an increase. I think the number of undiagnosed cases in cancer will have increased by 40%. And it is not because there is a decrease in incidence. People didn't make it to their, to their doctors or so what. So we'll see in the coming years, in the coming 10 years, decade, and a significant increase in the number of mortalities linked to cancer, to oncology. So having organizations like ours that are investing in innovation in different areas, in cancer notably, will have an impact to respond to what will come over the next decade or so in Canada, and I think internationally.
It's really interesting. I agree with both those things, and one of the interesting little opportunities that this new virtual world has presented us is exactly the one you talk about, where historically some of the more specialist folks, it's been difficult for us to recruit here because they ask themselves that classic question: okay, I arrive and this doesn't work out. Where do I go from there? And there isn't necessarily the wealth of opportunities for those truly specialist people, chief medical officer, for example, that exists in Boston or San Francisco. In this world now, we've all accepted it. So there is a really interesting opportunity that exists to address one corner of that challenge we talked about. How about you, Kate? What triumphs are you really proud of?
I'm still standing. I think seriously, I'd speak to the stronger piece of national and international collaboration that's gone on. Getting in touch with people, talking, and the sharing of data that we've seen, it's happening with greater ease. It's terrific because people are mission driven to finding treatments and therapies for things like COVID. And so I think that that's really opened up a sense of community, that everyone is the science community are competitive folks, which is good, but sometimes we also need to remind ourselves about the greater good of why we're in this, and that collaborative piece is really important. And I think that that's what we've seen across our network, is some really strong collaboration and the coming together with colleagues from around the world. It's been easier, and people have been willing and wanting to do it, which is absolutely terrific. And I also think that I see it as a triumph, but it's going to be hard. Folks, our research community has really had to double down and push hard to get their research to keep it going. There was this all intense COVID, but what about the cancer research? What about the diabetes research? What about all of these other? And the community really had to work very hard under very difficult circumstances to get programs and projects back up and going. And I think it's a triumph that they've been able to do that. And I think that this community, our researchers are working at full speed right now. They are in high demand and really going hard. And so I think it's a triumph for them that they've been able to pick up and keep pushing forward.
Yeah, I think that's a wonderful point. Just before I move to the next question, let me just say that we're happy to to take questions from the participants not on the panel. So please feel free to use the Q&A function. I've got it up, and will do my best to keep a close eye on it to address specific questions. Let me ask maybe a little bit provocative question and a negative one, which I don't usually like to do. But we've all talked about the importance of collaboration and how effective it's been in the context of a crisis. And to a certain degree, it's the old story of a crisis does actually force people to collaborate effectively. What is the real roadblock to better collaboration? I mean, inherent in what we're saying, we all want to collaborate well, and the four of us do collaborate effectively, and our colleagues collaborate effectively. What are the roadblocks? What are the real challenges to collaboration? Nadine, maybe I'll start with you. What's the thing in there that you worry about that makes it hard to collaborate?
Well, me, the question addressed to me, right, Gordon?
Yeah, well, I'm asking everybody, but I'll start with you.
Okay, very good. Well, I already mentioned it a little bit. The forced collaborations are, I think it's a roadblock in the way the programs are currently conducted. Because again, we know where we're best at within organizations. So we should have the full empowerment to find the best collaborators, the best that are complementary to what we do. So having programs that are dictating which collaborators we should go with and not, I think it's comme on dit, c'est un frein à l'innovation. It's being able to better choose, with which partners we will conduct our activities. I think that's the main roadblock that I see from my point of view.
That's actually a really interesting point. I hadn't thought about that. I think that's exactly true. Kate, how about you? What makes it hard for you to collaborate with folks?
Sorry, was that to me?
Yes.
Sorry. My hearing's not great. I went straight to the same thing that Nadine went to, which is it's some of these program structures. They prevent us from actually being able to collaborate with federal entities that would be natural partners because of the way that money has to be leveraged. And so it keeps us, it creates a barrier, in fact, and that's a problem. I hate that because at the end of the day, I know that in order to be competitive, in order to meet my contribution agreements requirements, I have to have a one-to-one partnership. And well, I can't count federal dollars, so therefore, I guess I can't go and work with so-and-so. So even though they'd be the natural.
That's interesting too.
Sorry?
No, I interrupted you. Sorry, I thought you finished.
Yeah, so that's where I find my greatest frustration.
That's really interesting too, because certainly I would presume that's one of the unintended consequences of that kind of leverage expectation, because certainly our colleagues in ISED expect us to collaborate well, effectively amongst ourselves and use the resources that they put out there. So that's a really interesting point. Rob, what's the roadblock that you see in terms of making it hard for people to collaborate?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with both Nadine and Kate that that kind of some of the restrictions and requirements involved with kind of the federal funding can be a problem. And I think going beyond that, there are other logistical challenges with regards to timelines and limitations on not just on kind of leveraging, but in terms of how to hit certain requirements and contractual. So there's definitely I think a lot of logistical piece there. It's always a tough challenge. I know and I'm not just saying this in case any of my colleagues are on the call here from ISED, but I recognize the challenge between wanting to provide freedom and flexibility to recipient organizations to do the work they need to do, while at the same time having accountability measures in place that allow for alignment with federal. So I think this is a challenge that we all need to kind of address, but that's definitely a problem, not just for the funding, but also because timelines sometimes don't add up, or your partnership if you're on a 1 or 2 year funding cycle, it's hard to create a 5-year funding, agreement between two organizations. So I think those are definitely issues. I think there's a second issue, which is just a bandwidth issue. Sometimes there's so many things happening that it's like, okay, great. Like there's this really great opportunity and we're moving forward. I'm going to give so-and-so a call and so-and-so a call, but I don't necessarily think to call so-and-so, like there's so many other things. So maybe we should also be thinking about, are there ways to create mechanisms to help spread the word or to be whatever else. So I think that sometimes there's a bandwidth challenge of just getting the word out on the opportunities, even with the best of intentions that can happen. But I do want to just say, that I think that, and this is certainly not relevant to, I think, our group on the call, where there's lots of good, I think, coordination, but we as a sector sometimes slip from, what should be kind of an abundance mindset into a scarcity mindset. This idea, that it's like, well, there's a zero sum game when it comes to like working on this or that or the other thing, and therefore, that sometimes one part of the research ecosystem will benefit at the expense of another, rather than saying, look, like this is about growing the pie and finding more opportunity for for more company creation, for more talent attraction, training and retention, for more investment, and so on. And so I think that sometimes in a busy world that the ecosystem can fall prey to this kind of scarcity thinking, where there isn't the sense of like, look, everyone else's successes is going to benefit us collectively, and we all therefore have an interest in lifting each other up. So I think the more we can do is to remind ourselves of that when we start to slide into just the like anxieties of delivering on contract and so on and so forth, the better it is for everybody.
I think that's such a great point. Man, if I was going to answer the question, I was going to say that the thing that distinguishes our four organizations is we don't really care who gets credit. We know if something works out, we're all going to share it equally, and I think sometimes we worry too much out there about who's going to get the credit, as opposed to how do we actually make a difference, and have a certain amount of faith that if we're actually making a big difference, there'll be plenty of credit to go around. And that's, again, one of the things that I think has changed demonstrably over the last 4 or 5 years, and certainly I know the four of us are aligned on that, but it just doesn't really matter. But I also love that expression of the scarcity mindset. I think that's a really important point. So let's shift gears a little bit. We've got coming up on 15 minutes left. So let me just shift gears a little bit and say, or ask, what's the one thing that's changed going forward? There's lots of elements of life post-pandemic that we all know about. But within the work that we do together, what's the one thing that changed? Kate, maybe I'll start with you. What is that thing that really, other than being able to work with your dog?
What's the one thing that's really changing? I think there's lots of things that are changing, but I would say that there is a really lovely openness that's going on across the community these days. I hear more of a natural desire to want to partner, a genuine desire to want to partner and work together. One of the things that and Gord knows this, but Admare and Stem Cell Network have come together on a new partnership where Admare will provide commercialization expertise on the assessments of some of the research projects that come through our network to help identify which ones of them have the strongest commercial potential and which ones can be built out even further. And that's a really terrific partnership. Developing it was really straightforward, and I think this is going to have a long-term benefit for my area, and that's just a genuine desire to say, look, let's leverage what you've got, and vice versa, and there's no hidden agendas going on. It's just about wanting to grow the sector overall, and I think that's really valued. So that's to me what I think, how I would answer your question. I don't know if that's exactly what you're looking for, Gordon, but
Well, I mean, from my perspective, obviously it's a great answer, so I'll go with it. I think that's cool. Rob, what do you think? What's the one thing that's changed that isn't going back? Oh, Rob, you ruined our record, man. You're on mute.
Oh man, sorry about that. My first time on Zoom here. So I think the one thing that's really changed for me is that we know we can do it, right? Like, I think that this is something that's underestimated sometimes. I think about whatever, like in my other life, I'm a music fan, right? And so you'll see sometimes, like, all of a sudden a bunch of bands from the same city will make it big. When I was at my PhD in the early 2000s in Montreal, all of a sudden hit it big, right? And you've got all these bands. And in some ways, it's because one band kind of makes it and shows the way, and everyone around them kind of realizes they can up their game and they can make it too. And I think that there's an element of that happening now. And, Kate mentioned Moderna. We can think of Abcelera. We could think, all of a sudden there are examples in the ecosystem of like, hey, wait a minute. There is a path in life sciences to go from research to the big time. We can actually do this. And I think that's not been lost on our friends in the federal government who are putting in place the kinds of funding and infrastructure that I think we only ever used to dream about in life sciences, recognizing that this is a moment. So I do think that in a sense, we're like the Montreal music explosion kind of ready to happen here, but in the life sciences space, not at least because we've seen that path laid out now. Perhaps that makes it a little easier for everyone.
That's a really neat example because it does go hand in hand with that aspirational discussion we were having, right? That with that aspirational change comes the exemplars that other people can say, well, we can do that too. I think that's a great example.
Well,
and
yeah.
How about you? Sorry, Kate. Go ahead. Okay, Nadine, over to you then.
All right. So one aspect I would add, and I totally agree with my colleagues. I would say that for once, it has been an opportunity for the life science sector to have different voices advocating for it. So what I mean is that for the first time, we've seen in all the chambers of commerce, local, regional, that they are advocating for investment in life sciences. They're the ones, showcasing what we were doing, we have been doing for years. And I think that is here to stay because, again, the COVID pandemics has shown us how having a healthy population is directly in link with the economic recovery and growth of the country. So I think for years to come, we'll have this positive effect on our sector going forward, and not being the only one advocating for it, but having the financials, the VC firms, and different sectors, advocating for what we do.
That's really interesting too, and it's also interesting that we seem to have dropped a lot of the not silly things, but the things that kind of bother us all day to day, and we're really focusing on goals. So it's really interesting to have that kind of amplification that you're talking about, Nadine. I think that's a really interesting example too. So listen, we've got about 10 minutes. So let me go to the last question to each of you. So you know what the makeup of our audience. What's the one piece of advice if you're going to say to them, look, here's the thing you really got to dig into to either succeed in this space or help us build this space? What's that one thing? And Nadine, why don't I put you on the spot this time and let you start us off with that one thing.
So I will restate one of my conducting message throughout, is that we really need, as a country, we're talking to our colleagues in government, we need to have policies or programs or ways to facilitate natural collaborations so that we can efficiently transfer academic innovation into truly benefiting therapeutic solutions for patients in Canada. So, and the way we can do it is by investing enough dollars public dollars up front without the need to go get matching from too early matchings from the private sector, so that collectively we can increase the value of research innovation done in Canada and attract those foreign R&D dollars into Canada, into the countries. So that would be my my final statement.
Perfect. Rob, what about you?
So yeah, I think one, we should not be afraid to think big. I think that we should not take the Canadian kind of compromise or the modest way out, but instead recognize that this is a moment and we have immense strengths to build on, and those strengths include our research institutions. They include a real, I think, entrepreneurial spirit, ready to drive exciting new companies. We have a population, I think, that is ready to well educated and ready to pitch in. So I think we build on those strengths. We really do aim for the fences. One thing I just want to maybe underline for all of us is that we want to we didn't really have a chance to get into this, but I do think that we need to make sure that we are taking a very broad and inclusive approach to the work that we're doing. And that is both when it comes to like talent development, but especially when it comes to building out collaborations and asking questions, to ask ourselves, like, who's not at this table when we're discussing some of the challenges we're facing in the health sciences space. Certainly we at Genome Canada recognize that, genomics work has left out large sort of populations in terms of the data that we've collected historically, something that we're now we're committing to solving. I think that's true for all of us, that as we move forward, we need to make sure that we are also bring everyone alongside us in Canada, including Indigenous people in Canada, because I think that will provide even more momentum from a societal perspective, as well as open up lots of opportunities for economic growth and so on. So just a final parting word is to make sure that we're having an open invitation to the table as we're talking about how to build good, strong collaborative structures going forward.
That is such a great point. I'm really glad you brought that up, because again, I couldn't possibly agree more with that. And the interesting thing is that sometimes it's hard work, but it's just hard work. I mean, as I said to some colleagues recently, when you look at the kinds of things that we try and do in this space, when you think about manipulating stem cells or printing living tissue, that's hard too. So doing the hard work of equity, diversity, and inclusion, it shouldn't be that big a challenge for us. But I think we do sometimes. Well, clearly we do. Get wrapped up in our objectives without thinking about how we make sure that everybody's at the table. And look, let's be honest. When you think about some of the public discussion around vaccines and mandates and what have you, I think it's fair to say that some of that reluctance is a reflection of more people feeling excluded than it is a reflection of deep scientific knowledge, frankly. And honestly, that's on us. Right, that's on all of us, because it's hard to do, especially when you're trying to do big things. But we just need to do the work. Kate, how about you?
Where to begin? Okay, so what do I think? My advice is we don't always need to have a knee-jerk reaction to ask about who else is doing something around the world and how can we copy their model. Canada is got a lot of talent and is doing some really great things, and the rest of the world's looking to us, in fact, in many ways. And so I think that we need to put that aside, that perspective that someone else must be doing it better, because Canada's kicking it and we're punching it above our weight for sure. So I think that's one of the key things. As a mature country, we need to be able to be proud of what we're able to produce and what our scientists are producing and how our sector's going. We see venture capitalists looking to Canada, looking at our IP all of the time because it's high quality. And so we just need to now think about how we develop it and how we keep it within our borders. So, I think that it's very important that we think about the strengths that we have and then how we leverage them. And also patience. I feel like, it's very tough. Our policymakers are stuck in a world between the political end where we need immediate action now and deliverables versus what the research use over a period of time. And we need to figure out what that balance is and have patience, because we don't want to be in a situation where we're making and setting expectations that simply can't be achieved. And so that comes down to an understanding of patience and what it takes to be in the life sciences and to deliver therapies and technologies into the clinic and into the market. So yeah, be a proud Canadian as we think about policy development, and be patient as we work to deliver good, innovative therapies.
Wow, okay, those are both, I think, great points. I mean, the first, I share the frustration when everybody says, okay, what's going on somewhere else? Let's remind ourselves that where the foundational research came around vaccines that we've all enjoyed, and where a lot of that continues to happen is here. And to Rob's point earlier about we're starting to realize some of that aspiration, and it's very exciting. So let's certainly learn from others, but let's not worry about replicating others. Let's worry about taking full advantage of the extraordinary research enterprise that we have here, and continuing to build a sustainable industry. And frankly, to your second point, I'd say it's patience in both its forms, right? It's patience with a C for sure, as you meant it. But look, we're all in this space because we like to do well, but we need to do good. And so let's remember patience with a T as well. The people who are ultimately receiving the benefits of what we try and do, and ameliorate suffering and improve health in all of its aspects. We are at the end of our time. I am so thrilled to have had the three of you in this discussion today. I said at the outset that it promises to be a really compelling conversation with very thoughtful people, and obviously that was borne out quite effectively. So thank you, Nadine, Kate, and Rob. Thank you, all of the participants, for joining us in this session today. Enjoy the rest of the conference, and thank you again.